The first time the foster boy walked through the tall iron gates of the elite school, he felt smaller than he ever had before. The buildings were old and grand, with clean stone walls and wide windows that reflected the sky. Everything looked expensive, quiet, and perfectly controlled. Students moved with confidence, laughing softly, wearing neat uniforms that fit them like they belonged there. He did not. He carried his bag tightly on his shoulder, the strap worn and faded from years of use. Inside it were a few notebooks, a borrowed pen, and the only thing he truly cared about, sheet papers folded again and again until the edges were soft. Music notes filled those pages. He did not look at anyone as he walked. He had learned that looking too long invited questions, and questions often led to pain. This was not his first school. It was not even his fifth. Foster homes had come and gone, each one promising stability, but rarely delivering it. Some homes were kind, but temporary. Others were cold and quiet. He had learned early that nothing lasted long. When the social worker told him he had been accepted into this school through a special program, he did not feel lucky. He felt afraid. Places like this did not make room for boys like him. In his first class, he sat in the back. The room smelled of polished wood and old books. The teacher spoke in a calm, measured voice, but her eyes moved quickly to him, paused for half a second, then moved on. It was not hatred. It was something worse. It was doubt. He had seen that look many times before. During lunch, he ate alone. The cafeteria was bright and full of sound, but his table felt quiet. Students talked about piano competitions, private tutors, and summer trips. He listened without meaning to. Music came up again and again. This school was known for it. Awards lined the hallways. Photos of students in formal clothes hung on the walls, all smiling beside grand pianos. He tried not to think about the piano room, but after classes ended, his feet carried him there anyway. The door was slightly open. Inside the room was dim, lit by the late afternoon sun. Several pianos stood in neat rows, their black surfaces shining. He did not touch anything at first. He just stood there, breathing slowly, feeling something settle inside his chest. This room felt different, safer, quieter. He approached an old upright piano in the corner. It looked less perfect than the others. Some keys were yellowed with age. He sat down carefully, as if afraid someone might tell him to leave. His fingers hovered above the keys. For a moment, he hesitated. Then he played. The sound was soft at first. Simple notes, slow and careful. Then, without thinking, he let himself go. The music changed. It became deeper, fuller, filled with feeling he did not have words for. Every foster home, every goodbye. Every night spent wondering where he would be next seemed to pour out through his hands. He did not notice the teacher standing in the doorway. She had come back to collect some papers. When she heard the music, she stopped. It was not perfect. There were small mistakes. But there was something honest in it. Something raw. She watched the boy for a long moment before quietly stepping away. She did not say a word. The next day, whispers followed him down the hall. Some students looked at him with curiosity, others with clear dislike. He kept his head down, pretending not to notice. In music class, the teacher asked if anyone wanted to volunteer to play. Hands shot up. His stayed still. He had learned not to draw attention. When class ended, the teacher stopped him. "You play the piano," she said, not as a question. He froze for a second, then nodded. Double quotes, "Where did you learn?" "Nowhere," he said quietly. "I just listen and practice when I can." She studied him for a moment, then nodded once and walked away. No praise, no encouragement. Just that same look of careful judgment at home, if it could be called that. The foster house was quiet. The family was not unkind, but they kept their distance. He practiced on a small broken keyboard someone had found at a donation center. Several keys did not work properly. He adjusted. He always did. Days passed. He learned the school's rules, both spoken and unspoken. Do not speak unless asked. Do not complain. do not expect fairness. Some students treated him like he was invisible. Others made small comments, soft enough that teachers could not hear. He pretended not to understand. Music became his escape. Every free moment, he returned to the piano room. Sometimes he played softly. Sometimes he played with anger. No matter what, the piano listened. It did not judge him for where he came from or what he lacked. Slowly, his presence was noticed. Not everyone was happy about it. One afternoon, he overheard a group of students talking near the lockers. They laughed as they spoke about the upcoming school performance, an event that brought important guests and donors. Being selected could change everything for a student. He won't last, one of them said. People like him never do. The boy kept walking. His hands trembled slightly, but his face stayed calm. That night, he stared at his sheet papers, smoothing out the folds. He did not dream of winning. He did not dream of applause. He only wanted to play. To be heard, even if only for a moment. At school the next day, a notice was posted. Auditions for the performance would begin soon. Students gathered around it, excited and nervous. He stood at the edge of the crowd, reading the words over and over. For the first time since he arrived at the elite school, he allowed himself to hope. Just a little. He did not know that hope would soon be tested in ways he never expected. After the notice about the auditions went up, the halls were louder, filled with nervous excitement and quiet competition. Students practiced everywhere. Some tapped rhythms on desks. Others hummed softly as they walked. Music teachers moved with purpose, clipboards in hand. Already thinking about who would shine and who would not, the foster boy watched all of this from a distance. He did not rush to sign up. He did not talk about it. He kept going to class, kept his head down, and kept returning to the piano room whenever he could. The hope inside him was still small and fragile, like something that could disappear if touched too roughly. One afternoon, while he was playing, the same teacher from before stood nearby again. This time, she did not leave. She listened with her arms crossed, her face unreadable. When he finished, he stopped immediately and stood up. Ready to apologize. "You should audition," she said. The words caught him off guard. "I don't think I'm ready," he replied honestly. She tilted her head slightly. "Ready or not, opportunities do not wait. Write your name down." He nodded, though his chest felt tight. When he finally wrote his name on the list, his handwriting looked smaller than the others. Still, it was there. From that moment on, things changed. Some students began watching him more closely. A few smiled in a way that did not reach their eyes. Others whispered when he passed. He heard fragments of conversations about how someone like him even got in. Jokes about charity cases, quiet laughter that followed him down the hall, in music class. The teacher asked him to play in front of everyone for the first time. The room fell silent. He sat at the piano, hands shaking just enough that he noticed it. He took a breath and played. The sound filled the room. When he finished, no one clapped right away. Some students looked uncomfortable. Others looked annoyed. A few looked surprised. The teacher nodded once slowly. "That will be all," she said. At lunch, his table was no longer empty. Two students sat nearby, talking loudly about how talent without training never lasted. Another leaned over and asked where his parents were. He answered quietly and went back to eating. That night he practiced longer than usual. His fingers ached. His mind replayed every look, every whisper. He reminded himself why he played in the first place. It was not for approval. It was because music was the only thing that never left him. The auditions began a week later. Students were called in one by one. Some came out smiling. Others came out pale and silent. When it was his turn, he was led into a smaller room with a piano that looked newer than the one he usually practiced on. 3 judges sat behind a table. They did not introduce themselves. "Begin when ready," one of them said. He played carefully at first, then let the music flow. He forgot about the judges, forgot about the school. For a few minutes, it was just him and the piano. When he finished, there was a pause. "Thank you," another judge said. "You may go." That was all. Days passed with no word. He tried not to think about it, but it was impossible. Every time the intercom crackled, his heart jumped. Every time a teacher called his name, his stomach tightened. When the list finally went up, a crowd formed instantly. He waited until most people left before walking over. His eyes moved down the page slowly. His name was there. Not at the top. Not at the bottom. But it was there. He felt something warm spread through his chest. For the first time in a long while, he smiled. That smile did not last long. Practice sessions for the selected students began immediately. The main piano room was reserved for them now. He arrived early for the first session and noticed something strange. The piano assigned to him was different from the others. Older, slightly worn. Still playable, but clearly not the best. He said nothing. As days went on, small things began to happen. His sheet music went missing and then reappeared with pages out of order. His practice time was shortened without explanation. Once he arrived to find the piano lid already closed and locked, while others played freely. He tried to believe it was all coincidence, but the looks he received told a different story. One afternoon, as he practiced alone, a group of students stood near the door. They did not enter. They just watched. When he made a small mistake, one of them laughed softly. Another shook their head. Natural talent only goes so far, someone said. He kept playing at home. The foster family noticed his exhaustion. He came to dinner late, eyes tired, shoulders tense. When asked if everything was okay, he nodded. He did not know how to explain the feeling of being tested every moment. Like the ground beneath him could give way at any time. A staff member who cleaned the music room sometimes stopped to listen when he practiced late. She never spoke much, but she smiled kindly. Once she said, "Don't let them make you forget why you love it." He held on to those words. As the performance day grew closer, the pressure increased. Teachers became stricter. Mistakes were pointed out more sharply. He noticed how others were corrected gently, while he was corrected publicly. Still, he did not quit. Late one evening, he sat alone at the piano, hands resting on the keys without playing. Doubt crept in. Maybe they were right. Maybe he did not belong here. Maybe this was as far as he could go. Then he began to play again. Slowly, softly. The music reminded him of all the nights. He had survived with nothing but hope and sound. The next day, he overheard a conversation between two teachers. They spoke in low voices, but he caught enough to feel his stomach drop. Words like balance, reputation, and risk floated. Through the air, he understood then. This was not just about music, it was about who was. Allowed to succeed, the final rehearsal schedule was posted. His name was there again, but his time slot was last. The piano listed next to his name was the same old one. He stared at the paper for a long time. A quiet decision formed inside him. He would play, no matter what, even if the piano fought him, even if the room turned cold, because walking away would mean they were right, and he was not ready to believe that. As he left the hallway, he did not see the pair of eyes watching him from a distance, nor the hand that quietly adjusted. Something inside the piano assigned to him for the final performance. The stage was being set, and he had no idea how unfair the test ahead would be. The day of the performance arrived quietly, without the drama he had imagined. The sky was gray, and the air felt heavy as he walked toward the school. Students gathered near the entrance in pressed uniforms, their families arriving in expensive cars. Voices were polite and confident. Laughter came easily to them. He kept walking, his bag resting against his side. His sheet music tucked carefully inside. Inside the building, everything moved fast. Teachers gave instructions. Chairs were adjusted. Lights were tested again and again. The stage looked larger than it ever had during practice. Rows of seats stretched out into the darkness, already beginning to fill. He waited backstage with the other performers. Some stretched their fingers. Others whispered last-minute reminders to themselves. A few glanced at him, then looked away. No one spoke to him directly when his turn approached. A staff member handed him his sheet music, even though he already had it memorized. "You'll be using the upright piano," she said, pointing toward the side of the stage. He nodded. As he walked out, the lights blinded him for a moment. The audience blurred into shapes and shadows. He could feel hundreds of eyes on him, measuring him before he even touched the keys. He sat down and placed his hands on the piano. Something felt wrong. The keys were heavier than usual. One pedal felt loose under his foot. He pressed a few notes softly, hoping it was just nerves. Then he began to play. The first section started well enough, though the sound felt uneven. Then a key stuck for a split second. Another sounded dull, as if muted. He adjusted his fingers quickly, trying to stay calm. His heart beat faster. A whisper spread through the audience. He kept going. As the music grew more complex, the problems became harder to ignore. Notes that should have flowed smoothly felt broken. The pedal did not respond the way it should. He felt like he was fighting the instrument instead of playing it. He made a small mistake. A soft laugh came from somewhere in the crowd. His face burned, but he did not stop. He pushed forward, trying to control his breathing, trying to remember that he had survived worse than this. Still, the piano seemed to resist him at every turn. Another mistake followed. The judge closest to the stage exchanged a look with the others. A teacher in the front row frowned. He finished the final note and let his hands rest on the keys for a second longer than necessary. The silence felt endless. Then came polite clapping. Short, careful. He stood up, bowed slightly, and walked off stage. His legs felt weak, but he did not stumble. He would not give them that. Backstage, no one met his eyes. A teacher passed him without speaking. Another performer brushed past him, shaking their head. He found a quiet corner and sat down, staring at the floor. His ears rang. His chest felt tight. He replayed every second in his mind, wondering what he could have done differently. The answer always came back the same: nothing. When the performance ended, students and families gathered in small groups, praising certain moments, discussing favorites. He slipped out unnoticed. Outside, the air felt colder. He walked without direction, his feet carrying him past the school gates and down a quiet street. When he finally stopped, his hands were shaking. He sat on a low wall and pressed his palms together, trying to steady himself. The memory of the piano's resistance replayed again and again. He knew instruments. He knew their flaws. This had been different. It had not been an accident. That night, he did not touch the keyboard at home. He lay on his bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the house settling around him. The foster family spoke softly in another room, giving him space without asking questions. Sleep came late. The next day at school, the mood had shifted. Some students avoided him completely. Others watched him with open satisfaction. In class, teachers spoke to him less than before, as if he had already faded into the background. During lunch, he sat alone again. He barely touched his food. His thoughts circled the same question: why invite him at all? After classes, he went to the piano room out of habit. When he sat at the familiar upright piano, his fingers moved without effort. The sound was clear, balanced, honest. He stopped playing suddenly. Anger rose in his chest, sharp and unfamiliar. Not loud anger, but something deeper. Something heavy. He examined the piano closely, pressing keys, testing pedals, listening carefully. Everything worked as it should. He understood then. Someone had wanted him to fail. The realization hurt, more than the performance itself. It was one thing to be doubted. It was another to be set up. A staff member entered quietly, carrying cleaning supplies. She noticed his expression and paused. "That wasn't your fault," she said gently. He looked up, surprised. "I heard the piano," she continued. "It wasn't right." He swallowed hard. "I thought so too." She nodded, then glanced toward the door before speaking again. "Be careful. Not everyone wants the same outcome." She left him with those words. For the rest of the day, he moved through the halls like a ghost. He attended class. He took notes. He answered when called upon. Inside, something had shifted. That evening, he opened his bag and took out his sheet music. Instead of smoothing the pages, he left the folds as they were. They told a story of survival, of persistence. He sat at the broken keyboard and played softly. He adjusted for the faulty keys, changing his touch, finding ways around the damage. The music changed, but it did not disappear. Neither would he. The following days were quiet. No one spoke of the performance directly, but its shadow lingered. Teachers praised other students openly. Photos were taken. Congratulations were exchanged. He kept practicing. Late at night, he played with a new focus. Not to impress. Not to win. But to understand. To adapt. To become stronger than the instrument in front of him. He learned how to listen more closely. How to feel a piano before trusting it. How to turn flaws into something meaningful. By the end of the week, the hurt had settled into determination. He did not know if he would ever be given another chance at that school. He did not know if anyone would admit what had been done. But he knew one thing. If they tried to break him with a rigged piano, they had failed because he was still playing, and next time, he would be ready. The days after the performance moved slowly, as if time itself had lost interest in the school. The excitement was gone, replaced by quiet pride for some and quiet disappointment for others. Posters from the event were still on the walls, but no one stopped to look at them anymore. For the foster boy, each morning felt heavier than the last. He woke up before his alarm, staring at the ceiling, replaying the sound of that piano, the uneven keys, the weak pedal. The moment when he knew something was wrong and could do nothing about it. At school, teachers treated him politely but distantly. No one asked how he felt about the performance. No one asked if something had gone wrong. It was easier to move on than to look too closely. In music class, he was placed at the back again. When students were asked to play, his name was skipped. He noticed, but he said nothing. Speaking up had never worked for him before. After class, he went to the piano room like always. This time, he did not sit down right away. He stood there, listening to the quiet hum of the building, the distant sounds of footsteps in the hall. For a brief moment, he wondered if it was time to stop coming here. Then he sat down. He pressed a single key and listened carefully. Then another. Slowly, he tested the piano the way someone might test the ground before stepping forward. Everything felt right. He began to play. The music came out softer than usual. It carried tiredness and hurt, but also something new. Patience. Control. He stayed with the piano longer than he ever had before, not rushing through anything. He paid attention to every sound, every response. Over the next few days, this became his routine. He practiced less for speed and more for understanding. If a note sounded wrong, he adjusted instead of fighting it. If the rhythm slipped, he slowed down. It was no longer about proving anything. One evening, a teacher entered the room while he was playing. This teacher had rarely spoken to him before. She stood near the door, listening quietly. "You didn't stop," she said when he finished. He looked at her, unsure what she meant. Most students would have, she continued. After something like that, he shrugged. "I don't really have anything else." She nodded slowly. "That can be a weakness," she said. Then, after a pause or a strength, she left without saying more. At home, the foster family noticed small changes. He spoke even less than before, but when he practiced, the music sounded deeper, more thoughtful. One evening, the foster mother paused outside his door, listening. She did not interrupt. The broken keyboard became his training ground. He learned how to work around missing sounds, how to make silence part of the music, how to stay calm when things did not respond the way they should. In the following week, the school announced a small public recital. It was not as important as the big performance, but parents, donors, and guests from outside schools would attend. Participation was optional. He read the notice twice. At first, he folded the paper and put it away. Later that night, he took it out again. The memory of the rigged piano returned, sharp and clear. Fear rose up, telling him to stay quiet, to stay safe. He listened to it. Then he set the paper down. The next day, he signed up. When his name appeared on the list, a few students noticed. One raised an eyebrow. Another whispered something under their breath. He ignored them. Practice for the recital was less formal. Students chose their own time slots. When he arrived for his first session, he found the same old upright piano waiting for him. He placed his hands on the keys and smiled slightly. This time, he tested everything before playing. He pressed each pedal. He played soft scales. He listened closely. He adapted. As days passed, something unexpected happened. A few students began to sit quietly at the back of the room while he practiced. They did not mock him. They did not speak. They just listened. One afternoon, a student asked him a question. "How do you keep going?" He thought for a moment. "I don't really know how to stop," he said. The student nodded, as if that answer made sense. Not everyone softened. Some teachers still watched him with caution. Some students still hoped he would fail again. But the weight he had carried before felt lighter now. He was no longer playing for them. A few days before the recital, the staff member who cleaned the music rooms found him practicing late. "They fixed the piano," she said quietly. He looked up. "Which one?" "The one you'll use," she replied. Someone complained. Did not ask who. On the night of the recital, the hall was smaller than before, but the audience felt closer. Faces were clear this time. Real people, not shadows. He waited backstage, breathing slowly. His hands were steady. When his turn came, he walked out without hesitation. He sat at the piano and took a moment to listen to the room. He began to play. The piano responded. Cleanly, smoothly, but even if it hadn't, he would have found a way. The music filled the hall, carrying everything he had learned since the last performance, every adjustment, every quiet night, every moment of doubt turned into focus. When he finished, the applause came faster this time, louder. Real, he stood and bowed, feeling something loosen inside his chest as he left the stage. He caught the eye of a teacher in the audience. This time, there was no doubt there, only respect. He knew the truth about the first performance might never be spoken out loud, but it no longer mattered the way it once had. He had learned something more important. They could control the piano, they could control the room, but they could not control what he became when he refused to quit. And somewhere deep inside, he felt it clearly. This was not the end of his story. It was only the moment he stopped, letting others decide how it would go. After the small recital, the school did not return to normal. Something had shifted, quietly but clearly. The foster boy felt it in the way people looked at him now. Not with kindness, not with praise, but with curiosity mixed with caution. As if they were seeing him for the first time and realizing they had been wrong. He went back to his routine, classes, quiet lunches, long hours in the piano room, but the heaviness he once carried was lighter. He no longer walked with his shoulders pulled in. He no longer felt the need to disappear. One afternoon, a notice appeared on the main board. A regional music evaluator would be visiting the school. Not a competition, not a show. Just an observer invited to listen and offer feedback. Participation was optional. But teachers were encouraged to recommend students. He read the notice once and walked away. Later that day, the music teacher stopped him in the hallway. "You should play," she said. He looked at her, surprised. "You think so?" She nodded. "You've grown," that was all she said. He signed up without overthinking it. On the day of the visit, the piano room felt tense. Students took turns playing while teachers stood nearby, whispering comments. The evaluator listened quietly, taking notes, but giving nothing away. When it was his turn, there was no stage. No spotlight. Just a piano in a room filled with chairs. He tested the keys out of habit. Everything worked. He began to play. The music was not flashy. It did not try to impress. It told a story. A slow beginning. A struggle. Pause. Then strength. When he finished, the room stayed silent for a moment. The evaluator looked up. Who prepared you? No one, he replied. The evaluator nodded, writing something down. After the session ended, students left in groups, talking quietly. He stayed behind, packing his music away. The staff member who cleaned the rooms passed by and gave him a small smile. You did good, she said. That evening, an announcement was made. The evaluator had recommended a few students for outside programs and scholarships. Names were read one by one. When his name was called, the room went still. He felt every eye turn toward him. A teacher cleared her throat and continued reading. He sat frozen, unsure how to react. Applause came slowly, then grew louder. Some clapped with real feeling. Others clapped because they felt they had to. Later, in a quiet office, he sat across from a school administrator. Papers lay on the desk between them. There were concerns, the administrator said carefully. About the earlier performance, the boy listened, his face calm. We reviewed the piano, the administrator continued. It should not have been used. No apology followed. No names were mentioned. That does not change what happened, the administrator added. But we are prepared to support your next steps, he nodded. Outside, the sky was clear for the first time in weeks. He walked home slowly, letting the air fill his lungs, at the Foster house. The family listened as he explained the opportunity. They did not fully understand the world he was stepping into, but they understood effort. They congratulated him in quiet ways. That night, he played one last time on the broken keyboard. The sound was thin, imperfect. He smiled anyway. Over the next months, things moved quickly. Forms were filled. Meetings were held. He traveled to places he had only seen in pictures. Rooms with pianos that responded to every touch. At the elite school, his final days passed without ceremony. Some teachers wished him well. Some avoided him. Students who once ignored him now nodded as he passed. On his last afternoon, he returned to the piano room. He sat at the old upright piano, the one that had been with him since the beginning. He played softly, not for anyone else, just for himself. The music carried gratitude, sadness, and relief all at once. When he finished, he closed the lid gently and stood up. He did not look back as he left the room. The elite school continued on, as institutions always do. New students arrived. New talents were praised. Old mistakes were quietly forgotten. But the story of the foster boy stayed. It lived in the staff member who remembered the broken piano and the students. Who learned that talent? Does not ask for permission, and in the boy himself. Who learned that being tested unfairly did not mean being defeated. He had walked into that school carrying doubt and silence. He walked away carrying something stronger, a voice, and no one could rig. That the new place felt strange at first. The buildings were not as grand as the elite school, but they were alive in a different way. People talked freely in the halls. Doors were open. Music could be heard from many rooms at once, overlapping and imperfect. The foster boy arrived early on his first day, as he always did. He stood outside the main music building, listening. Someone was practicing a fast piece nearby, missing notes and laughing at their own mistakes. Someone else played something slow and gentle. No one seemed embarrassed. He took a deep breath and walked inside. A staff member welcomed him without looking at his background papers for too long. You'll find your room on the second floor, she said kindly. Take your time. No one stared at him. No one whispered. His assigned practice room was small, with plain walls and a simple piano. Not perfect, but well cared for. He sat down and tested the keys. They responded honestly, biled without realizing it. The first weeks were overwhelming. Classes moved fast. Students asked questions freely, challenged ideas, and shared their struggles openly. Teachers corrected mistakes without judgment. The first time he was surrounded by people who loved music for what it was, not what it could bring them. Still, old habits stayed with him. He practiced longer than required. He apologized too often. He flinched when teachers walked behind him. One afternoon, during a group session, teacher stopped him mid-piece. You don't need to defend every note, the teacher said gently. Let the music breathe. He nodded. though it took time to understand what that meant. Outside of class, he struggled in quieter ways. Forms needed signatures from guardians. Questions about family came up casually in conversation. He answered simply and moved on. At night, in his small room at the foster house, doubt returned. Was he good enough to stay here? Was he just lucky? On those nights, he played softly, reminding himself that music had carried him this far. One evening, a message arrived. School had sent a formal note acknowledging his transfer and wishing him success. It was polite, careful, empty. He read it once and put it away. Weeks passed. His playing changed again. It became calmer, less guarded. Teachers noticed. During a small workshop, students were asked to perform something personal. When his turn came, he hesitated. "You don't have to," the instructor said. He shook his head. "I want to." He played a piece he had written himself, built from fragments of melodies he had carried for years. It was uneven in places, honest everywhere. When he finished, no one clapped right away. Then someone said quietly, "Thank you for that." That was enough. A few days later, an opportunity came up to play at a community event. Nothing formal, just a small gathering in a public hall. Volunteers were needed. He signed up. The piano at the hall was old and badly tuned. Some keys were slow. The pedals squeaked. He laughed softly. When it was time to play, he adjusted naturally, the way he had learned to do long ago. The audience listened, relaxed and open. Some closed their eyes. Some smiled. Afterward, a woman approached him. "You made it feel close," she said. "It's like you were playing just for us." He thanked her, surprised by how good that felt. Back at school, his confidence grew slowly, unevenly, but steadily. He began speaking up in class, asking questions, offering help when others struggled. One afternoon, a younger student sat beside him during practice. "I heard what happened at your old school," the student said quietly. He paused. "It's not important anymore." The student nodded. "I'm glad you're here." Those words stayed with him. Near the end of the term, a showcase was announced. Students could choose whether to participate. The focus was on growth, not perfection. He thought about it for a long time. On the day of the showcase, the room was full, but relaxed. No judges, no rankings, just listening. When he played, the music carried everything he had learned. The struggle, the patience, the refusal to quit. When he finished, the applause felt different. It was warm, shared. Later that evening, as he walked home, he realized something important. For the first time, music was not the only thing holding him together. He had people now, and that made all the difference. The future was still uncertain. Foster placements could change. Money would always be tight. Nothing was guaranteed, but he knew who he was. A boy who had been tested unfairly. A boy who adapted. A boy who kept playing. And this time, he was not alone. Life at the new school slowly found a rhythm, the kind that did not rush or punish small mistakes. Days were still full, but they no longer felt like a test he could fail at any moment. He woke up early, practiced, went to class, and returned home tired in a good way. Yet something inside him stayed alert. Old habits do not disappear easily. Every compliment felt temporary. Every good day felt fragile. He reminded himself often that progress did not mean safety. One afternoon, a notice was shared in class. A national youth music program would be selecting a small group of students for a long-term mentorship. The program was known for opening doors to higher education and professional stages. The process would be demanding, with live evaluations, written reflections, and interviews. The room buzzed with excitement. He listened quietly. Later, the instructor stopped him after class. "You should consider applying," she said. He hesitated. "There are better players." She smiled slightly. "There are many good players. There are fewer honest ones." That night, he stared at the application form for a long time. His questions about background, support systems, and goals filled the pages. Some were easy, others made his chest tighten. He answered carefully, truthfully, without trying to make his story sound impressive. When he submitted it, He felt both lighter and afraid. Weeks passed with no response. He focused on his studies and practice, reminding himself not to wait for something that might never come. Still, every time an email notification appeared, his heart jumped. During this time, a challenge emerged. A group project required students to perform together. He was assigned to a small ensemble with players who were confident and outspoken. At first, they spoke over him, deciding tempos and interpretations without asking. He stayed quiet. During rehearsal, the music felt uneven. Everyone played well, but something was missing. Finally, he spoke. "Can we try listening to each other more?" he said softly. The room went still. One student frowned, another shrugged. Just once, he added. They tried again. This time they slowed down, adjusted, paid attention. The music changed. Afterward, no one said anything for a moment. That was better, someone admitted. From then on, they listened to him. The ensemble performance went well. Not perfect, but connected. It reminded him that his voice mattered, not just through the piano, but through presence. Then the email arrived. He had been invited to the next stage of the mentorship, selection. The evaluation would take place in a large city, in a hall filled with unfamiliar faces and high expectations. Travel arrangements were included, but a guardian's signature was required. That part was complicated. Meetings were held, papers were signed. The foster family agreed, though uncertainty filled the room. No one knew what this opportunity would lead to, or how long it would last. On the day of travel, he packed lightly. Sheet music. A notebook. The same worn bag he had carried through so many changes. The city felt loud and fast. The building where the evaluation took place was modern and cold. Inside, students waited quietly, each lost in their own thoughts. When his turn came, he entered a room with a single piano and a small panel seated behind a table. "Begin when ready," someone said. He took a breath. The piano felt different from any he had. Played before, responsive, demanding, honest. He played. Not with fear, not with the need to impress. He played with trust. When he finished, one of the panel members asked, "What keeps you going?" He thought for a moment. "The idea that sound can carry what words cannot," he said. They nodded. The interview ended without any sign of the result. He returned home tired and unsure. Days passed, then weeks. During that waiting time, doubt returned quietly. Maybe he had reached his limit. Maybe this was as far as he would go. He kept practicing anyway. One evening, while playing alone at school, a younger student approached him. "I'm scared I'll mess up," the student said. He looked at them and smiled gently. "Everyone does. You just learn how to keep going." The words surprised him. They were true. Then the letter arrived. He had been selected. The mentorship would begin in the coming months. Exposure and support he had never imagined having. He sat quietly after reading it, letting the meaning settle in. This time, the victory did not feel loud. It felt steady. At school, teachers congratulated him. Students smiled. Some asked questions. That night, he sat at the piano and played without thinking about the future, without fear. He knew challenges would come again. But he also knew this. No matter the room, no matter the piano, no matter the test, he had learned how to stand, and that was something no one could ever take from him. The mentorship program began with excitement and fear mixed together. Meeting was held online, faces appearing one by one on the screen. Students came from different places, different backgrounds, all carrying their own hopes. Some spoke confidently. Some stayed quiet. He listened more than he talked. The mentor spoke about discipline, honesty, and long journeys. There were no promises of success, only guidance. That felt real to him. In the weeks that followed, the workload increased. Practice hours grew longer. Written reflections were required after every session. Feedback was direct, sometimes uncomfortable. Mistakes were pointed out clearly, without softening. At first, he welcomed it. Then the pressure slowly returned. He began waking up earlier, staying up later. His hands felt tired more often. His mind replayed instructions again and again, afraid of missing something important. Old thoughts came back quietly, telling him that one mistake could undo everything. During one session, the mentor stopped him mid-piece. "You're holding back," the mentor said. He froze. "I'm trying to be careful." The mentor shook their head. "Careful is not the same as honest." The words stayed with him. Outside the program, life did not slow down. Schoolwork piled up. Travel arrangements for in-person workshops were announced. The foster family worried about schedules and costs. Even with support provided, one evening, after a long day, he sat at the piano and felt nothing. The keys responded, but the connection was gone. Panic rose in his chest. He closed the piano lid and stepped away, something he had never done before. Days passed where his playing felt forced. Teachers noticed his tension. A friend asked if he was okay. He said yes, though he was not sure. The first in-person workshop arrived at the worst possible time. Travel was exhausting. The hall was large and unfamiliar. The piano on stage felt stiff under his hands. When he played, his thoughts crowded in. He made mistakes, not small ones. Afterward, feedback was polite but distant. He could feel the difference. That night, alone in his room, he stared at his hands. Doubt pressed in hard. Maybe he had pushed too far. Maybe he did not belong here after all. He considered quitting the program. The thought scared him, but it also brought a strange sense of relief. The next morning, he skipped practice and went for a long walk instead. The city was quiet. He listened to the sounds around him, footsteps, wind. Distant traffic music existed everywhere. Later that day, found a small public piano in a shared space. Anyone could play it. Children pressed random keys. Someone played a simple tune and laughed. He sat down without thinking. He played something easy, something familiar. The tension eased. A small crowd gathered. Not because the music was perfect, but because it felt close and human. When he finished, a child clapped loudly. Others smiled. For the first time in weeks, he felt present. That evening, he wrote in his notebook instead of practicing. He wrote about fear, about pressure, about how easy it was to forget why he started. At the next mentorship session, he spoke honestly. "I'm scared of losing this," he said. The mentor listened carefully. "Then stop trying to protect it," they replied. "Let it change you instead." Something loosened inside him. He adjusted his routine. Shorter practice sessions. More listening. More rest. Slowly, the joy returned. At the next workshop, his playing was not perfect, but it was alive. Feedback improved. The mentor nodded once, a small sign of approval. Back at school, he shared what he had learned with others. Not instructions, but reassurance. "You don't have to carry it alone," he told a younger student. The mentorship continued. He learned that growth was not a straight line. Some days, he would fall back. Other days, he would move forward in ways that surprised him. And through it all, one truth stayed. Clear Dot Music was not a test he had to pass. It was a place he could return to. That understanding changed everything.